Welcome everyone. So for today's session, this will be a practical live coding session whereby we will be transforming a typical CRUD application into hexagonal architecture. And it's also great that we have Marcus Rådell with us today. We'll be doing live coding. So I'm really looking forward to it. Also, at any point, feel free to write any comments or questions inside chat. So as we're doing this live coding, I will also be periodically looking at any comments in chat. So I guess we could now get started with the practical work. And just before we go on, whoever is interested in reading more about hexagonal architecture, feel free to look at these links. And let's get onto the coding part now, which everyone has been waiting for. So let's see the screen. Maybe we need to, I think, increase the font, since often font is an issue. If someone from the audience could also type in whether the font size is at readable for you, just so that we know whether it's fine or if we need any further increases. Okay. I think we can get started. So here we have a very simple application. This is in TypeScript, but all of this will be understandable to anyone from other languages as well. And let's look at some of the controller methods that we have below. So we have API challenges, whereby we have get methods. We also have a post HTTP method, and we have a put method. And maybe Marcus, maybe you could just give a short summary of what this application is about. So what are challenges?
Yeah. So the app is called Code Typing, and it's the start of a speed typing app for programmers where we can take a look at the tests. You can give your code typing test a name and some content, and then they should then try to write the same thing and get some result in how fast they wrote it, stuff like that. Right now, it's only create, read, delete. So there's no put, there's no update. And it's very simple. And we basically spin up the server and listen to port 3000. If you're interested, you can go to / get the Postman JSON file, use that. And otherwise than that, we use Postgres database, I believe, with Prisma. And there's some basic validation of the input, very basic, just to not get caught in TypeScript specifics. And right now in this file, we just check if we have the data we suspect. Otherwise, we send some very basic status code. Mm-hmm. Not really the real, just like 200s, 400s, 500s.
Great.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, sounds good. So this was just a short intro. So it's a typical CRUD application. We can see everything is in the controllers, and it's all coupled to a specific ORM, which is in this case Prisma. So let's see. As a first step, we want to have a one-layer application. So as part of our one-layer application, we would like to have a controller, for example, a challenge controller, so that all of these HTTP methods are all in the controller. So this at the moment is just one layer.
Okay. So do you want me to move? Yeah.
So we could create a file, challenge controller, and just all of those the post, put, get methods to go into it.
me see here which type it used. Yeah, it is Express. And can I? No, I need to do it myself. Import. So that resolved itself, and let's see if I can take the other part here. And then we need the Prisma client as well. So that one is now green, and now we need to use it here. That spelling? Oh, export. So expose it. There we find it, and we need to send in app and Prisma client, and now it should still work. And we didn't even show it before, but now we have tests, and they still work. So we can actually run it as well and get all. Yeah, so it's actually doing everything as it should do. So this works. Should we make a commit?
Yes. So we can commit, and so it's essentially, we could say, introduced controllers, introduced a challenge controller, and this is now essentially our single layer app.
Perfect.
Okay, great. And then I'll just do a very quick screen share. So what we have up to now conceptually is we essentially have a single app. I mean, here, okay, I wrote MVC app, but in this case, we have a REST API. Anyway, it is a single layer. What we now want to move on to is this three layer structure, having some presentation, separating business logic and database access. It will still not be hexagonal, so it's still going to be traditional layering. So now we want to move on to a traditional three layer app. So let's get back to the code. So aside from the challenge controller, could we now introduce a new class called challenge service? So what we want to do is the REST API controller, we will want it to be very thin as possible, and essentially transfer all the, code that's actually doing the work into the challenge service. Oh, and just a small note, if you could just check the spelling for the file challenge service, I think we need an additional E for the challenge. Yeah,
that's true.
Right?
At least I got the E right. Right. Last time when we dry ran, kept misspelling. Okay. And also see that I actually made a mistake here in sorry, wrong side. App.get/ that should be moved to the outside, but we can make that as a refactor, so we stay focused.
Exactly. Okay. So then what we'd like to do is for our service, so essentially having a service class, and you would have methods like get challenges, get challenge, and then passing in the ID, a method like create challenge, and also update challenge. So essentially all the stuff that we have in the REST API controller already, we are just now moving it into the service.
Line 15.
Yeah, so get challenges. The next one is get challenge. Maybe I'm just thinking, could we firstly do the declaration of the methods, just so that we get the method naming, and then transfer into the body if possible?
Absolutely. So get challenges, get challenge.
Yeah, get challenge. And what do we have in chronological order below? If you could just scroll.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay. Let's see.
Create challenge.
Yeah.
For post. Yeah.
Yeah. Create challenge.
Actually, let me just.
And let's see what is below. Create challenge. Delete challenge.
All right.
Okay. Great. So I'm thinking now, just so that we move step in smaller steps. We could maybe run our tests. I mean, this should not interfere with anything, just so that we can make a maybe commit, like created, service file, and then we will fill it in method by method.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. And just to be clear, yeah, they passed.
Great.
Yep. Okay.
And just a note to the audience, the kind of test that we have up to now is a test. It's not a unit test. It's actually a REST API test, because currently the code is not unit testable because everything is intertwined together. So that's why there is no unit test at the moment. That will be a topic for the future. Okay. So let's see. Maybe we could now move the code. Where's the one for get challenge? So yeah, we are separate.
The singular one.
Exactly. What's the first one? I think the plural one is the one at the top. Get challenges.
So then we have this one here, and get challenges, return. Now we need Prisma client as a dependency.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and also another comment to the audience. So notice on the left-hand side, line 15, we have the res.json. That's HTTP stuff. That's why that one stays on the controller. Whereas the part that's actually interacting with the database or business logic, we're moving it over into the service.
And before I forget, export so I can reach it. Yeah, so now I need to actually create this one.
Yeah, we could introduce the dependency, the service dependency, just so that we get it working for the one method before we move on to other methods, just to make sure that the mechanism works.
And then challenge service equals challenge service factory. Send in Prisma. And then we should be able to use challenge service dot get challenges like so, and fingers crossed, looks fine.
Yes. And also just comment for any viewers who are from, I mean, Java or .NET or other OOP languages. On the left-hand side, we would have a class called controller, and then we would in the constructor be injecting the challenge service.
Exactly. So everything that has a word factory in it, you can see the arguments that it's take as something that you would send to a constructor.
Yes. Now this challenge service, this is the one that would now essentially is being injected. That's the general idea. So
do you want me to make a commit, or should we go through all of them?
Let's see. Maybe we'd want the first one to work. Did we run the tests?
Yeah, let's do it again. Pass.
Okay, I'd say yes. We could make a commit. That way we're safe with these smaller steps in case
I agree.
goes wrong. I mean, with live coding, but up to now it's actually going well. So let's see how it goes until the hour.
And okay, so now we're done with the first one.
Exactly. And then I guess we could move on to the get challenge and the one, yeah.
And how much of the code do you want me to take? You only want me to take basically the database part, or do you want me to take the validation?
Yeah, that's a good point. So here we want our controller methods to be as thin as possible. So we'll be taking from line, I would say 24, so including the actual validation until line 32. And we'll also need to be introducing these exceptions to handle, instead of the 400 status, so we'll introduce an exception as well. So I guess we could do copy paste and then replacing it with exception.
So for now, I know that you wanted like thinking ahead. We will actually need a specific exception, like a subclass.
Yeah, like validation.
I want to take it in a bit of smaller steps. So
Yes.
let's see here, return throw new error for now. So that's something that we need to improve on.
Yes.
If challenge throw new error. Okay. That should then break the test if we start using that. So
yeah, well, let's try it. This is also good that we see that the tests are doing something. It would be too boring if they just pass the whole time.
Yeah. Okay. Challenge equals challenge service dot get challenge ID. So now problem is, do I have tests for this? I get challenged by ID.
Okay, so let's see our tests are.
This is not quite done. That's why. So it's not. I don't actually think I have enough tests to see. So what happened now is that I forgot to return the challenge from the service layer. Mm-hmm. That means that get challenge ID. Yeah. Yeah. So now it's good that we took small commits. So now we're back on track at least, but we're missing. We changed the behavior, but I don't have tests for that in the integration tests for it.
Yeah, and this is yet another, I guess, case in legacy projects about tests, which is, I guess, a whole other topic. I think maybe we could commit this small step.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe before we go on further, since we introduced this error, that error would need to be mapped back to the 400 status before we forget to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, we want to be a bit more specific with error. So we do want to create a new validation error.
And important point whilst you're doing this with validation error is again another comment. So in the REST API, we have response codes like 400 category and we have 500 category. The 400 category is stuff that we are recognizing as essentially invalid input. So we are creating here a validation error class to represent essentially validation errors in the actual request itself, and that one will be mapped to 400 status. Any other errors, general errors that occur, they would be mapped to 500 status.
I realize now that we should probably at least run some basic manual testing, because that's what we have. And basically, we just get a default really poorly formatted HTML error that's kind of like default of Express, because we don't have an error handler. So we need to add the error handler.
Just maybe a small idea. Should we maybe first do the manual try catch and then the error handler?
That's true. That's true. Okay,
Yeah.
so controller. So let's see here.
Yeah, we're catching specifically, I mean, the validation error. That's going to have to be converted into 400.
Let me just check. Did I do some? Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then I need to move that line as well. Okay.
And I have another question here. When this is doing catching, is it catching any error, or is it catching validation error specifically?
Any right now as it is. And then if we can see if our instance of validation error, then we do, sorry. Where did it go? Here. So in that case, the 400, otherwise you want the 500?
Yes. So what we have here is that our REST API method is essentially delegating to the service to do whatever business logic or database stuff, and the REST API controller method is only dealing with JSON stuff and these status codes. So if we could maybe run the tests again, and if this works, I think this could be another commit.
Just wonder if
we can, I think, continue on with the, yeah. Let's see what's happening there.
Let me just see npm test. Tests run npm run dev. Let me just see. Yeah, so now we actually get 400 bad requests when I ask for some kind of resource which doesn't exist. So now we get that nice 400 that we expect by manually testing.
Great. So we've seen both the manual and the automated. So let's see if we commit this, and then we'll go on to the next ones.
Save all and commit. And push. Okay. And the next step?
Yeah, so let's see. The next one, we have a post. So again, we would need to transfer the stuff that is actually doing some logic. So starting from line 40 until this is a long one. So this one, we actually have some even business logic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So we're transferring all the business logic and the database calls.
Yeah, let's see if I got it right now. Create challenge, return. I'm just thinking here. Let's start from the top. We need name, string, content, string. And this then should replaced by a throw. New date as pure. We have v4 UUID v4. So add import from UUID. Okay, that's good. And then we already injected Prisma client here. Then we returned ID. That means that now I should be able to const ID equals challenge service, create challenge, send in name and content. And don't forget to await this time. Yeah, so now it's a string, so that then should work as before. No, wait. If it's valid, it should work as before. So the tests should pass, but we still need to have that try-catch code duplication.
Yeah, I see. We do have the try-catch, I think, outside. That you have it. Maybe the one from outside could already be used. I see it online. Wait, sorry, 37. That you're opening up a try, and if you could just scroll, sorry, on the left-hand side. Yeah, I see.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so we already had some try-catch. So maybe within line 44, if you could do, I guess, a similar if as before, where you're testing if it's, validation error to do 400. Well, it's actually copy-paste of the code above. At the moment, we are doing copy-paste just to get things working. Later, we will see how this can be done in a cleaner way.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we run the tests, then let's see how it goes so that we can make another commit.
And twice fails. So we're not sending a validation error because, so this is, okay. So what happens now is that we actually get a 500 because it's Prisma. We have a unique constraint inside of our database. So this one here is failing. So in that case, we can make a specific try-catch if we want to. It depends.
I would say if we could maybe that one, let it fail with the generic, that one would be like seen as server-side internal issues. At the moment, we're only handling the client-side issues. Let's see what happens with the test run.
Yeah, so in that case, so in this case, if you just say like anything that happens with the database, that's a 500 right now.
Yeah.
Then that's just, let's see, add same name twice, fails.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, and that's the create. And lastly, we have delete. And then it's 52 to 54, I think.
Yes, so just that.
It needs an ID of type string.
And also, whilst you're doing that in the commit, I will answer, since it's the same thing as before, I will answer a few chat questions. So will you push this workshop on GitHub? So yes, this will be on GitHub, and we will publish it in the URL in the description. And yes, this live event will be published on YouTube. Yes, so it is being live streamed so that you can rewatch it later as well. And there was also a question, if you had to get different challenges according to the different params of the request, would you update the get challenges method, or would you do something different? Okay, in that case, our request would have certain parameters, and then inside we would pass those parameters to the get challenges method. So maybe for pagination filtering, it would get passed to the service, and then the service would do any processing needed, including calling the database. Okay, so let's see. Did we commit? Yeah, feel free.
npm test.
Yeah.
Looks good. Yes. And this also then has the throw thing, so that should also have been a part of that commit. I'll do
Yes.
one more.
So we do have now this repeated exception handling, and in the later we will see how this is done. So essentially we can see that in the service layer we're throwing exceptions, whereas in REST controller we are converting the exceptions into status codes.
I also see that, just for the audience, I should make sure, so the return, I'm not actually returning a value here. This is basically just making sure that we don't reach underneath. We could actually do it like this. If else, I think this makes most sense for non-Node.js developers.
Sure,
so I need to fix that so we don't have issues. But we can fix that once we consolidate the error handling.
Great. Okay. We also have a question. What's this extension that is showing the errors on the same line?
Oh, Errorlands. It's terrific. Let me see. Extension. Yeah. Reload required. I will not reload during live coding, but this is the one.
Okay, great.
Cool. And error handling too.
Also, we're getting some questions. Can you describe how the error class works, and is it not better to refactor that part of code into a function? Yes, it is better. So this current error handling that we're doing, this is currently temporary, just to get stuff working, and we will be doing refactoring later on. Okay, so now we have a fin controller, which is just delegating to the service. And we've now essentially moved over to the service. So now we have two layers. We have the controller and we have the service. Now for the service, we'll notice that the service, which is on the right-hand side, maybe you could just show, I think you can close the controller now, and just that we look at the service only.
Yep.
The service has both business logic, maybe scrolling down, so that we see that the interesting business logic from lines 28 until 36. That's an example of interesting business logic. We also have simpler business logic like validation, but we also have database calls. So from lines, let's say 40 until 42, all of this work with Prisma is database stuff. We now want to separate between business logic and the database. So we would now like to introduce challenge repository, which will symbolize, accessing the database. So we want all Prisma stuff, so that's all the stuff associated with the ORM database, to be referenced from the challenge repository.
And let's do the normal export const challenge. repository factory. And we already know this will need Prisma client. And return some instance with, so, okay, let's do the same. I really loved what we did in the service layer. We just stubbed out everything. So
yeah, exactly. And now here, in terms of the naming, if we could use list-like names, so get, add, remove. Oh, and also I forgot the get all. I think it starts off with the plural. Yeah, get all.
Yeah, get all. That.
Yeah, get by ID. Just
Yeah.
we could call it just so that it's like even different name from the service. Get by ID. Create, update, delete.
Create, skipping update, and then delete.
Okay. Great.
And now I should be able to use multi-cursor, I think.
And what we're going to be doing now is essentially cut and pasting any of Prisma code into the repository.
Okay. Cut and paste. Let me just take these small steps. It's CRUD as well. Introduce repository. Get all starting from the top. Yeah.
Yeah, so this first service method, the only thing that it was doing is calling the database.
Yeah.
And maybe we could already in the service, I guess, introduce that dependency now on the repository to try it out for the first method.
Yeah, and then I'll actually add it so we're backwards compatible. Challenge repository. And then we actually need a type for the first time. So challenge repository.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, and as you're doing that, I'll also answer one question from the audience. Is it a related layered architecture with hexagonal architecture? Is it similar? So currently what we're doing is just the plain old traditional layered architecture, whereby we are cut and pasting between the controller, the service, and the repository, but we still have the coupling. After we get this part done, after this repository, then we will start taking steps in terms of transitioning to hexagonal architecture. So at the moment, we are only in traditional layered architecture.
okay, so thinking out loud.
Isn't update missing?
Sorry? Export type
sorry,
equals...
so I'm just reading the next.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so isn't update missing in repositories methods? That's a good question. Currently, we do not yet have any need for update of challenge, hence we don't have it. If in the future there's a requirement for update, then yes, we would add it. Yeah, sorry for that. Let's see where we are up to now.
Yeah, so let me just sheet a bit and do underscore here. Challenge row. Let me just hover over and see. So challenge row is the name of the actual database ORM object. I just wanted to copy paste because it's that simple. We want our own challenge type. So now we see that.
I think that's the part that we'll introduce later when we do independence from the ORM. At the moment, we'll continue with the dependence on ORM. So at the moment, we will be still using challenge row as part of the layered architecture.
Great. Okay,
yeah.
Even better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And for now, I'm actually gonna comment those out and here as well, because then I can get it to work a bit faster. Challenge repository, factory, challenge repository. And now we can use the type challenge repository, challenge repository dot get all. I don't actually have to use the keyword await. I don't want to confuse the audience though, so I'm trying to stay consistent. Just know, if you know TypeScript or JavaScript, this isn't really needed in this very simple case. This means that challenge service factory, if it's created, should work. I guess that one thing, Valentina, right now we're actually creating the challenge service inside of the controller, not outside being injected in. So that's something I'll leave it up to you to decide.
Let's see, maybe that part, after you get this build working for this one, I think that would also be good to pull out, simply because even in layered architecture, it will be injected from outwards. So
yeah, that's on me. Challenge repository, Prisma client. Challenge repository. So now it's green over here. It's green over here. Let's see here. Service factory is getting it, and we're using inside of get challenges. We're calling challenge repository get all. That means that we expect green tests. Ooh, yeah. I feel like that's a commit. Use
yeah.
All repository. All right. So we do have some cleanups that we can do then, and yeah, I really think that if Valentina, this is your area here. So challenge repository and challenge service. Where do you want it injected into the controller?
Yes.
Okay, I'll fix that.
This means even when we're doing in terms of layered architecture, we still do have this injection going on. It's just that the injection is not abstracting. The thing that we're injecting is actual infrastructure. But yes, we are doing injection.
And then I'll start with the repository, and then we need to construct it in our app.
And this, at the moment, our app is serving as composition root. So we are essentially composing any of these dependencies. We're currently doing dependency injection in a manual way. Of course, someone could use dependency injection framework as well.
And let's see, so now we're injecting it. That means that the test should still work the same. Cool. Inject repository into. And then we need to do the same thing for the service, but that means then that we actually need a type for the challenge service.
Yes. And this in languages like Java or .NET, we would just be doing, class challenge service. But here, what we see is the way it's done in TypeScript.
Yeah, and note that I'm in TypeScript, you can use type or interfaces, and they're very interchangeable. So I'm just going to stick with type for everything.
Yes, let's go in that way.
Okay. And now we need get challenges promise and it gives back then challenge row array. Get challenge promise. That must be a challenge row in single form. And then we should have, let's see here, create challenge. Create. That should give ID back, I think. Create challenge, ID, return ID. Yeah, and then we have delete challenge, which actually right now, what I think this return here.
So you can just do the deletion and
yeah. Okay. Yeah. The main thing is like for here, delete challenge. I think that I meant that there's different styles. If this was a REST API, should I return the ID of the deleted resource? Okay. For this session, let's just say that we don't. We just
yes. We're not going to be returning the ID. We're just performing the deletion. Okay.
And then we have the challenge service interface done. That means that I should be able to use that to inject. That's okay. Now I'm back on track. Challenge service. Challenge service. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we could run our test to see if it's working.
Right now, it's not working yet, and I'll just make sure that everything here is fine by saying that we're gonna, from this factory function, we're gonna return challenge service, and get challenge is not assignable. Yeah. Okay. ID string. Then I guess that we have the same thing here. Yeah. Create and then delete. That's also an ID. Yeah. And since we're implementing it, we can remove the types here so don't have duplicate information. Okay. And then we can actually send it from the app. Then, so let's see here. Here's the repository layer, const challenge service equals challenge service factory, which also wants a bunch of things. Prisma client. What was it? Prisma client challenge repository.
Yes, this is the one where we are shifting away to repository, but we didn't yet do it.
Yeah, so now, yeah, okay, yeah, where we could have done it in a better order here, but
this is fine.
Challenge service. So let's see here.
Could we delete lines 14 and 15? Prisma
Exactly. Because now when we actually move them out, now we actually have that layered.
Yeah. So the challenge
graphical.
controller is only dependent on the service.
Okay, so that was a huge step. So hold on.
And as you're committing, I'll answer a few more other questions. So the question was, what is challenge row? And someone answered, I believe challenge row is the entity model for now. So yes, it's the database entity model. In other words, the ORM model. So we can see that we are currently coupled with the ORM. It's something that we will change later when we shift to hexagonal architecture. So I would say after we finish, let's see where we are with the repository. Do we have a few more other repository methods? Okay, so we're currently still in layered architecture. After we finish these 3 repositories, feel free to start transferring them. We will then be going to hexagonal architecture after this. So it's like coming soon.
Okay, challenge repository. So here, let me fix it so we can see. So get challenge. Then we want to get the actual challenge from, let's see here. Let's actually start with the type. And
and here I want to make a few more comments. So here, as we can see, we're still in layered architecture. All that we are doing is essentially cut and pasting into separate classes. So we're cut and pasting from service into the repository class. And as we can see, since all that we've done is cut and pasting, we still have all the dependencies. So all the dependencies on infrastructure. So like challenge service is transitively dependent on the ORM because the challenge repository is dependent on the ORM. So this is the case in traditional layered architecture. Again, from hexagonal architecture, like this is this part will be changed very soon.
And let's see here, challenge repository factory. Let me add this one here, challenge repository. And that's true. It can challenge row or no. Good. Now everything is green on the tests. Passes. So then we're done with get by ID.
And these tests still do help us. So this means when we're working in a legacy application, which is not unit testable, that at least that we have a higher level like REST API tests, so that even as we're doing this simple movement, that we have some confidence in it. Yeah, so we can, I guess, move on to the other remaining create and delete methods. Yeah, create.
And create needs a name. No, this is actually, yeah. Oh, let's see here. This one is actually a bit more interesting. Because we only send in name and content to the service layer, but then into Prisma, we actually need, and in this case, I will just call it data.
Yes.
And
the simple cut and paste at the moment.
ID string, name, string, content, string.
So this one I will announce it soon. So after we get this challenge repository, then I think we'll be staying on for another, Marcus, if it's fine for you, half an hour or something to try so that we get to the hexagonal architecture part. So it should be starting, I expect, in a few minutes after we get this done.
Okay, let's see here. And that returns an ID, which is a UUID, so it's a string. So now we have it typed, and right now it's lighting up like a Christmas tree. Let us see if I can actually. Okay, never mind. Data and return. Or actually, we don't. That one doesn't not need a return, so we just need code here. And then we called data already, so then we just send in data, and that works. Just let me see here. Promise void, promise string. Yeah, because I was wrong. This does not return. It does return void, which is the type. Is undefined if you don't know TypeScript. Void is basically undefined in JavaScript. So this implementation should now be right. And that means that I should be able to replace this code. And now I still need a wait, though. Otherwise, we get a race condition. So challenge repository create ID name level. Okay. npm test. Use repo create.
Great, and we have one more delete method, and then after that one, that's the end of layered architecture, and then we'll be moving on to the more interesting stuff like the hexagonal after this soon. So
yeah, and then we need an ID that we want to delete promise, and we don't give anything back from this layer as well. And so ID and then we await client. That should work. Challenge repository delete some ID.
I also have a question. Okay, after this, when we have on line 60 return null, could we just have a void for this one for the lead challenge and make the promise void?
Okay, so wait. Sorry, which line?
Sorry, on the left-hand side, how we do return null, can we avoid doing the return null and just that it's a void method, that delete challenge is void, and I think updating it above where you had the null.
That's consistent. Thank you. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Okay, and just to be super safe, works. Use repo delete.
Yes. So now that we've done all of this layered architecture, can we check, do we have any redundant dependencies anyway? So opening up the controller, the service, and the repository and looking at its dependencies at the...
There's, let me see. Do I have delete all unused imports?
Yes. So challenge controller depends on the challenge service. And let's see, challenge service. What does that one depend on?
Prisma client, but that's not used anymore.
So we can get rid of it. Yeah, great.
And then we need to go into the this one here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we see that it doesn't use Prisma anymore. directly.
Great. Yeah, so we can, I guess this could be committed. I mean, if the test pass, as essentially we cleaned up unused dependencies. And I will do a quick screen sharing now of where we got up to. So what we have now is essentially a classical free-layered architecture. Here in this case, we have a REST API as the presentation. Then we have business logic, which is the service. And we have database access, which is in our repository. So this at the moment is free-layered architecture. And what we're going to be doing right now is starting the shift to hexagonal architecture. Okay, let me know when you're ready for us.
Yeah, I was going to fix a small thing, but you were quick enough, so let's skip that. Okay, ready.
Great. Okay, so now we are officially, the official announcement is we're moving on to hexagonal architecture. And there was a question from the audience: is there any way we can check if the team is following hexagonal architecture, or at least point it is not hexagonal compliant? We will see now what it takes to have hexagonal architecture, which is introduction of certain interfaces that do not exist up to now. So here what we see is, if we look at challenge controller, a challenge controller is directly dependent on the challenge service implementation. Now, instead, we wanted to be dependent on an interface, and similar approach we'll also need to be doing in terms of the repository. Now, just to get moving forward, for the interface will be called, right, just challenge service. Whereas for the implementation, it will be called like impl, challenge service impl. So perhaps before we introduce the interface, could we update the implementation one so that it's called like impl?
Here, challenge service here.
Sorry, for the type, for the challenge service. Yeah.
Let's do it in the right place.
Okay, so this is just to emphasize that what we currently have is the implementation. And then we'd like to introduce the interface. So
I just want to make sure. So the main thing is that, so if you use the class, this would be challenge service impl, but given in TypeScript that it's like structurally typed, it's a bit of both, since we don't have classes here. So
yes.
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So
one more thing, could we rename that file from challenge service to be called challenge service impl, just to emphasize that this is an implementation?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can even run the tests. And then we'll introduce the interface if we want to move in smaller steps.
Yeah. So the main point for me is that if you look at this here, it's actually not an impl 6 to 11, but the actual factory is the real impl here. So that's a bit, yeah. So maybe it just maps a bit poorly. I wonder how we did it before.
I think we can still maybe continue on with the commit, and then just...
Yeah, so I just took a sneak peek at our test run challenge service. Then basically it's this one here is the impl, but this one will use the interface because we're not using classes. That's the main difference here.
Okay. So, okay, in any case, this is the file that has the implementation. So let's see if we did the commit, so that then we can move on to introducing the interface.
Okay, let's run with it. Rename into...
And now we'd like to introduce interface. And this interface, there was a question of, it may be too trivial question, what about port and adapters? We will now be introducing a driver adapter. So it will just be called a challenge service. So I'm not sure if that's the one where you said that that's the export type or how you're doing it, but we do a separate file. Is it possible that we have a challenge service file? That's the one that will have the interface, which is distinct from the implementation file.
Absolutely. And I think that, so just, it will take a few steps to get it where it looks familiar to non-TypeScript people.
Yeah.
Just have a leap of faith. We will get it in order pretty soon. So now we basically want to move this interface here.
Yeah.
And put that inside challenge service. I will rename it once we have stable code.
Yes, because it will not be called impl, then it will just be without the impl.
Yeah, so now that one is stable. We need to import it and challenge service. Yeah, let's just.
And on line 8 will then, okay, I guess it will be handled by the rename after.
Yeah, exactly. So now we should fix that, and we'll just call it challenge service as before. And what I think is that now this is called challenge service impl. So if this was a class here, the class would be named challenge service impl. So sorry, I need to rename. So yeah, now it's kind of isometric to what we would do with classes.
Yeah. Okay. And let's see. Now that we did this, could we go back to controller? Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Feel free to run.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So here on line 8, we see it is referencing the interface, not the implementation. This is a driver port. So we've introduced here a driver port essentially. And I will just do a quick screen share switch. So here we have a REST API. Here we have the service implementation. We've introduced here an interface for the service. Okay, continuing on, feel free to make the commit. This is the interface. And maybe we could already, start one side. Then for the repository side, we also need to do the same thing. So that repository, I guess, since you mentioned the export type, that's effectively the interface. So we could proceed, with the interface class file directly.
Oh yeah, let's see here. So this is actually
doing cut and paste. I mean,
yeah. So okay, I'm actually suggesting that I do basically the same, that I rename this to impl.
Yes,
because that's what we would do in other languages. Then same thing here. Change this here to impl factory. So we know that's the real implementation. But then now we also need a new file, challenge repository.ts, and then open to the side, go to.
So what we're now introducing is on the other side, the driven port. So challenge repository interface is the driven port, whereas challenge repository implementation is the driven adapter.
Okay, so yeah, that should be it. Good. And introduce report. Good, we're committed.
Okay, and so the service, if you could open up the service implementation again. Let's see, it's depending on the interface, and I'll just quickly show the diagram where this is in Hexagonal Architecture. So this is our challenge service interface. This is the challenge service implementation. This is the challenge repository interface. And this is the challenge repository implementation. So we've actually done currently the key aspects of hexagonal architecture. Let's see if you could, if we could now introduce the folders to reflect hexagonal architecture. So maybe we could start off with one folder could be called hexagon. And another folder could be called adapters.
Inside or?
Sorry, from source. So inside source, create adapters. And then inside hexagon, if you could create ports. And another folder inside hexagon, it could be internal. This is the internals of the hexagon. So now what we'd like to do is, and additionally within adapters, could we create subfolders driver and driven? And for the ports, also driver and driven. And we're now going to be just rearranging our files into where they belong. So let's see, challenge controller, that's a driver adapter.
Driver adapter.
Yeah, we could do it like this, moving and then fixing any references at the end if it's fine for you.
It should auto update. I fixed that since we did the trial run. So
okay. Yeah. Then challenge repository implementation, that's a driven adapter. Challenge repository interface is a driven port. Challenge service implementation is hexagon internal. Challenge service is a driver port.
Driver.
Yes, driver port. So this is the answer, since multiple people did ask, where are the ports and adapters? Here are the ports and adapters. If we could make this run. Whilst you're doing the, okay, let's see if there's something.
Let's see, server is running. Maybe it failed. We're updating something. Right.
It's returning 404. Interesting.
On slash, which is that's the one that I by mistake moved into the controller layer. So let me just move it to the right place so it makes sense when we debug it. And then use.
Or you can even comment it out, whatever you wish.
Yeah, that's true. This is just extra that we're not focusing on. So I'll just remove that one.
Yeah, that was just
okay, so but that means that I should also service running. Let me just start as I change that to status. That's a work done. My guess is that no.
Do we know which method is failing?
That's basically, since it's integration testing, it's weird. Okay, so it's actually building. Server is running. All the other tests are actually succeeding, though.
Is it just one test that's failing? Okay, we're just, for this demo, going to get rid of it since it's unrelated to our work. So let's see if the tests... okay.
Yeah, I'll check it later. We can write a comment somewhere for those that's interested. Yeah. Carry on.
So we can make a commit. We've essentially now restructured into ports and adapters, which is synonym for hexagonal architecture. There was a question, why don't you work with classes here? We could. So we may or may not choose to work with classes. There might also be functional languages where there's no classes at all. Hexagonal architecture can be applied regardless of whether we're doing it in object-oriented or functional way. So this means if it was Java and C#, we would have had classes, challenge controller, challenge repository, challenge service. I mean, the interface and the classes. In some other languages, they will not be classes, they will just be functions. And in some languages, interfaces don't exist at all, but instead abstract classes. All of those are fine. So let's see. We have resolved everything regarding the database. Now, if we could go back to the service implementation, which is the Hexagonal. Okay. Aside from the database dependency, we also had a dependency somewhere on time.
Yeah, that's true.
The
29.
day.getDay. Now, this essentially introduces a non-determinism. So we can treat time as also being external. And we also have a dependency on ORM. So let's resolve both of those dependencies, maybe the time one first. So if we could introduce a driven port, which could be called time provider. It is just an interface. And it would have the method like, for example, get time. And we would have an implementation of it inside the driven adapter. And it could be called, let's say, system time provider. We could then, so system time provider. And in that one, we will be using that regular system time call, which is non-deterministic. So main point is when we're speaking about driven ports is we are abstracting away anything that's I/O, like database, file, etc. But we're also abstracting away sources of non-determinism, so like time and stuff like that. Now, hexagonal architecture itself didn't really go into the non-determinism part, but it is related actually to unit testability. So you cannot write unit tests if you had the real dependency on real system time.
So let us see. I just want to make sure that people follow along a bit. So is there a new date that's in our system time provider? Then we actually want to use then new dates for get time.
So that's the new, system date time. Even though everyone says date, but it means date time. Okay, let's see. Could we then use it in the service? So we are replacing. So this is what you do when you're refactoring legacy applications. When we had a call to something that's either I/O or non-deterministic, we're now replacing it by the call to the driven port.
So now we're injecting it here. We should be able to replace it on 31. Time provider, get time. And now it should work the same way, but now we need to go. What did you call the app? The route.
Composition route.
Composition route. I need to
Yes.
remember that. So then we need to actually const time provider.
And as you're doing that, I also will answer now a few more audience questions. So is the folder structure you propose here for Hexagonal Architecture a must-do, or is there multiple good practices of folder organization that are compliant with Hexagonal Architecture? If yes, it will be nice to have some examples. This one that we've shown is one that is essentially directly translated from the terminology of the diagram. So the fact that we have adapters, that we have the hexagon and the adapters, the fact that ports also belong to the hexagon. So this is, how should I say, the clearest illustration of what is hexagonal architecture, but by no means don't feel restricted to using these ones specifically. So certain people, instead of adapters, maybe they could have called that folder infrastructure. Or instead of ports, maybe someone chose to use the word interface. Or instead of calling something driver and driven, maybe someone could have named it as user side, server side. So there is actually no must have. So here this we did is the closest interpretation to the diagram, but it is not restricted. So there is freedom. It is, the folder structure is not prescribed. How do you suggest to structure folders packages as the app complexity grows and more ports, adapters, and internal services gets created? Another excellent question. Like, what if we have, 50 ports, 50 adapters, etc. At the moment, we are having a monolith. To proceed forward, you could have maybe a modular monolith, and then for each module to apply hexagonal architecture. Okay, I think we can now continue on. So we've introduced the ports, adapters, we've abstracted away the time, but I now want to get onto this topic, the ORM. Shouldn't we depend on now abstract ORM instead of real ORM? Okay, so that's close. We actually don't want to depend on ORM at all. So if we could go to our challenge repository interface.
Challenge. The port challenge repository interface.
Yeah. So in that one, as everyone can see, we have dependency on challenge row. That's an ORM thing. Could you maybe open? I mean, okay, where's the challenge row defined?
Yeah, so here we can see node modules, Prisma client, and this is the generator type, but I can also show, here's the schema where you see line 14 to 19, this is the declaration.
Correct. And this, we do not want this in hexagonal architecture. And if we could go also back to challenge repository interface, and we even see this import at the start, like the fact that it's referencing Prisma client, we do not want this in our interface. So we want to introduce a domain entity. So not ORM entity, but domain entity, which could just be called challenge and which has nothing to do with Prisma. And
just
that one, yeah.
Type challenge.
I also have a small comment. When we're introducing that domain entity, it would be in the hexagon internal. Wait, one moment. I'm just thinking. Yeah. So put it in hexagon internal.
Right. Hexagon internal challenge. Yes. And then we need to import from it. Yeah.
Exactly. And the other thing that's now happening is, since we're dealing with challenges here, but when we get to the challenge repository implementation, where's the
let's see, driven repository
in that
import.
one, let's see.
So this one uses challenge repository now. So there's
I have a comment. For example, on line 9, it is returning challenge rows. We need to convert challenge rows into challenges. Similarly,
and just so people know, like right now they have the same shape. And TypeScript is not nominally typed as in JavaScript. I mean, in Java or I think C#. So actually, it's being like auto-converted into our type. But if for some reason we update challenge row, the ORM definition, and add or like rename a field, let's say, then it would actually break. Then we would have an error. So there's
we can keep it as is now. So just a note, whoever is working in other languages like Java, .NET, here you would do mapping between the challenge row and the challenge. So now we've removed ORM dependency. Main point is from the interface. So if the test pass, we can make a commit. And now after this one, since we've done essentially all the essence for Hexagonal Architecture, I will be wrapping up with just a few more questions whilst you're doing that commit. Did you ever do such a multi-module project with each module having driven driver ports? How did that go? It seems you end up with many mappers. So when we're doing these modules, first of all, I would recommend just start off with one project. And later, when you see that you get so many files, in other words, maybe your domain could be split into subdomains like bounded contexts, then you could do a split per bounded context, and then per bounded context apply hexagonal architecture, and then later you could even transfer then each bounded context to even be a separate microservice if you wish in the future. And also we had a thank you comment. So essentially, yes, this video will be published. So just to summarize, we've essentially finished our transformation with Hexagonal Architecture. And just to finish up the last review, if you could just expand all the, if you could collapse the folders, adapters and Hexagon, and I'm just doing a summary. Okay, so if we go into source, so we have our Hexagon and we have adapters, that's the external world. Going into Hexagon, Hexagon, maybe opening up the ports first. The ports are the interfaces, driver ports. Maybe open up driver ports. These are the user side interfaces, driven ports. If you could go into the driven ports, these are like the server side interfaces, and they are not dependent on anything that's technology specific. So we've abstracted away, there's no IO and there's no non-determinism. If we could go into Hexagon internal, this is where we have the implementation of our driver ports. And as we can see, even the domain itself is just an implementation detail, like challenge, which is a domain entity. And then we have the adapters. If you could just open up the adapters. So our driver adapters is the REST API controller, which calls. So driver adapter calls or uses the driver port, and the driven adapter, if you could just open up the driven adapter, the driven adapter implements the driven ports. So that's all for now. I know that there is quite a lot in this session because we covered both going from single layered architecture to 3-layer architecture and then transforming it into hexagonal architecture. I will encourage everyone to maybe re-watch the video. Feel free to post any additional comments on YouTube on this video, so that we can maybe take it into account in the future as well. So I just want to say thanks again also to Marcus. It was really great to have you here. So feel free to connect with Marcus as well. We will have links in the description. And now just to close off, so whoever is interested to find out more about hexagonal architecture, aside from watching this practical live coding, feel free to also read these materials, and also feel free to connect with me as well on social media. So let's see. That's all for now. Thanks again, Marcus.
Thank you.
And I wish everyone a good day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.